Hello, this is Becca from Willow Hill Designs. Welcome to my studio. And today I will be sharing a quilt that is made out of 2 jelly bars. And this is the quilt here. These jelly bars are from Blackbird Designs. I absolutely love their fabrics. I think they're beautiful, and I'm on a mission to use up all the fabrics in my studio, which are thousands probably. Thousands of fabrics in here. And so I had these 2 jelly bars, and this is a very easy quilt to make if you are in the middle of complicated projects. I'm working on a landscape quilt for my son and daughter-in-law down there as the one of the plans that I have that I'm following, one of the design plans, and I needed some mindless sewing. And so this is the quilt, and I will show you that. I will take it down and I will show you a little more closely and how the block is constructed. And I'll be right back. Hello, I'm back. I've taken the quilt down from the design wall to show you a little bit more how it's constructed. These blocks are cut. When they're sewn, they're approximately 5 inches because there's pinked edges. They don't all work out to exactly 5. So I squared them all up to 4.75. And so these blocks are 4.75 inches. Here's the individual blocks. Let's see if I can show you. Here's a block. And here's a block. Let's see. Kind of isolate it. This is a block. So this is what the block looks like. And it's cut 4.75 inches. So that finishes at 4 1/4. And so when these blocks are placed together in 4s, they actually make kind of a spinning pinwheel. And let's see if I can make sure to show you. So if you see here, these neutrals, the way the blocks are turned, the blocks are all constructed the same, but the way the neutrals are turned on the right, down to the bottom, on the left, up at the top, they make kind of a spinning pinwheel. And you could do these all out of the same fabric. I happen to just use the ones that were in my Jolly Bar. So that's really the only orientation that you have to think about of your block. All the blocks are the same, but it's the way that they're set in the quilt. And they make an L this way, and then half of a T this way. So an L this way, and half of a T this way. So that's how the blocks are oriented. And I can show you that a little bit better here. This is a layout, and there are 10 of these little blocks across and 10 blocks down. Unfinished, that comes to 43 inches wide by 43 inches long. Mine will be a table topper, and I will be adding some borders, so it'll be a small quilt. So here's the individual block. The neutral I shaded in with a diagonal line so that you could see. And so this block is set with the neutral to the right. This block is set with the neutral to the bottom, to the right, to the bottom, to the right, to the bottom. The next row, they're set with the neutral to the top, and then to the left, to the top, and to the left. So one way they make an L, one way they make an L, and then on the next row they make half of a T. Next row an L, next row half of a T. So that's really the only thing that you have to keep in mind. Otherwise, this is extremely mindless sewing, and none of the seams, doesn't matter how they're pressed within the block. other than the little corner square that goes up in the upper left corner. So this is what the block looks like, if you'd like to take a screenshot of those measurements. And I will put a PDF in the description box below that you can access. So this is a jelly bar is used to cut these blocks. And I guess I'll show that first before I go on. This is a jelly bar piece that comes from Fat Quarter Shop only, sells these jelly bars. And this jelly bar happens to be from Blackbird Designs, and the name of the line is Threads That Bind. And a jelly bar piece is 5 by 10. So all of the pieces that they give you are cut 5 by 10. And that's what prompted me to think, how can I use these two jelly bars, and what can I make out of them? And these are some of the other fabrics. I've cut through all of my jelly bar fabrics, other than a few neutrals left. Some of the fabrics were this pretty, red with roses. And I love these. They're very vintage looking. I love all different types of quilts, but I do love the look of vintage quilts. So these were just a couple of the fabrics that were in that fabric line, Threads That Bind. There were also some greens and some browns, brown florals. There was some different, here's a different red that was in there. And here was a brown. I can show you on the quilt. There were some browns that had larger florals, some of these reds that had larger florals. There were some dots, polka dots. Some of the blues have polka dots, and the browns as well. There's some blue polka dots and some browns. A brown floral with roses. So just a different little design on each of the colors in this jelly bar. And again, the colors were browns, reds, blues, and greens. So what I did was I took all of the colors out of the jelly bar and set those aside, the reds, blues, greens, browns. And then I took the neutrals and set those aside. And I cut those separately. And this is what a block looks like, one of the blocks. And again, they were finishing around 5, and I cut them down to 4.75. And you turn the blocks, and the way I've situated this corner square, it'll form a square as 4 blocks come together. Let's see if there's another block here. Most of them ended up in the quilt. Here are some here. So as they come together, they form a square. And one little tip that I would mention here, when I was making mine, it doesn't matter how you press these seams. You can press them any way you like, because they're really not matching up to anything. I seemed to press all towards the neutrals, but you could press the other way, or you could press both directions. But I did notice when adding these little corner squares, it was best to press those seams open, because unless you planned your row out as you were sewing to know which way to press, because when you lay your blocks up on your design wall, you really don't know which blocks will be going next to each other. And of course we want opposing seams so that they nest nicely. But I just thought that that was too involved. I wanted this to be easy and mindless. So I just pressed them open. So whatever blocks I did decide to put next to each other, these seams would be open, and it would be very easy to match those points on this triangle here for the row. So that's just a little tip, to press those seams open. The rest within the block you can press either way. Now, what I did was I had a little formula that I used. Well, I guess I'll show you the block. Here's the block if you'd like to take a screenshot. And again, I will provide a PDF in the drop-down notes. So the block, because it's a Jolly bar and it is 5 by 10, I worked this way across this strip of fabric, this 5 by 10 strip of fabric. So the first cut would be a 2.75 in a color, 1.75 in a color, and then the neutrals are all cut at 1.5. So 1.5 for the neutrals, then all of the colors, blue, green, brown, red, 1 3/4. Same thing here, all colors, blue, green, brown, red, cut at 2 3/4. So that is the colors and the cutting for that. Now, I did add a corner square to each of these blocks, and that corner square is just 2 inches. And the fabrics that I chose for that were red and ivory. Again, you could choose any color that you like to make those corner squares. And I used different ones. Some have little stars, and some that is part of the Blackbird Designs fabric. And some of them look like this. And what I did was I chose 4 of the ivory and red fabrics for the corner squares. And I had 25 of each. So that gave me 100 because there's 10 blocks across, 10 blocks down. So this is how we're cutting our little block. First, I'll show you how I cut the neutrals. And what I would do is take my strip ruler, and my strip ruler is by June Taylor, and it is a quilter's cut ruler. I know there's Stripology rulers out there, which are very nice as well. This is an old one that I've had for quite a long time. And let's see, where's my rotary cutter? It's hiding on me. It's here somewhere. I just used it. Here it is. Okay. So what we'd want to do is take our strip ruler and get our 0 and put that all the way to the edge of the fabric. And because this fabric has the pinked edges, which I don't care for at all, I bring the 0 just in from that edge a little tiny bit. So I made myself a little cheat sheet here for my neutrals, and if I'm cutting across in the strip, I would be cutting 1.5 and then adding 1.5 again for the next 1.5 would bring me to 3, then adding 1.5 would be 4.5, and so on. So first of all, I would just cut off that pinked edge and go on 0, cut that. Then I would go to 1.5 and cut that. And then I would go to 3, cut that. And then 4.5 and cut that. And then 6. And this is really how easy 7.5. This is how, and you can stack these up, and 9. And you can stack these up. I would stack 2 at a time, but I mean, if you felt more comfortable, you could stack more. So I just took that little pinked edge off, and it was just that easy to have my strips cut. Okay, and then this little piece here that's left over from the 10 inches, I would just cut that in half, and I use this as a leader and ender for my sewing machine. I keep these right to the right of my sewing machine. So it was that easy to cut my neutrals for this quilt. So that would be anything in this area. And again, you wouldn't have to, if you're not using a Jolly bar, you could choose one color. You could choose a black and white fabric. You could choose a red, you could choose just plain black, gray. You could make those little pieces, that the narrowest piece that is the neutral, in any color. And this is very similar to a hachi quilt, a Japanese hachi quilt. It's kind of a take on that if you want to look up something like that. So for the colors, I again made myself a little cheat sheet here so that I could go across my Jolly Bar and I could get the cutting done for this quickly. And again, I would bring my ruler over to the edge. Let me straighten this so it's not making anyone dizzy. So I would bring my 0 over to the edge where I would cut off that little pinked edge. And I take that little edge off. And then I would come in, now these are going to be 1.75 and 2.75 for the colors. So I would do 2 of each. So the first one would be at 1 3/4. So here's 1 1/2. And I would go to the next 1/4 inch line and cut 1 3/4. And then it would go to 4 1/2. And then it would go to 6 1/4. And then it would go to 9. And that quickly, again, depending on how many you stack up, that quickly you have your colors cut out. These are 1 1/2. Oh, I'm sorry, 1 3/4, 2 3/4, 1 3/4, 2 3/4. And again, this little bit, I just cut it in half and use it for my leader ender and keep it to the right of my sewing machine. So that is how easy these little elements are cut. And of course, these are not varying colors, but you can see how easy this little block is to put together. You just take your 3 strips and sew them together. It's that easy and mindless, which is what I love, considering I'm working on a landscape quilt, which is quite complicated and labor intensive. So this is easy. And then the next thing that you do is you have a 2-inch square, and that is always sewn to the top left of the block. And I'll show you on these finished, these 2 blocks here. Move that out of the way. And so when you're sewing that little 2-inch square onto your block, the neutral will always be on the right, and the little corner square goes to the top left. So neutral on the right, corner square to the top left. Neutral on the right, corner square to the top left. And that's how the blocks are constructed, very simply. And again, press those seams open. It will make your life easier. Ask me how I know that. And so let's see. This is a row that I have begun constructing here. And let's see. I can move this out of the way for now. Can you hear that alarm? That is telling me that my refuse has to go out tonight. Just a second, I'm going to close my door. They changed my day that my refuse goes out, and if I don't set the alarm, I'll forget and think I'm back on the old schedule. But again, here's a block. This is with the half of the T, and here's another half of the T starting, and then the next block will go like this to be sewn to it. So one of the things that I found was to press within the blocks open. because otherwise when you're sewing the rows, and I mean you may prefer to do this, you have to remember to press all of these to the right, all of these to the left, the next row to the right, the next. I didn't want to do that. Again, this was about easy, mindless, enjoyable sewing. So what I did was I just pressed the seams between the blocks open. So wherever a block is joined together, I press those seams open. So the only pressing that I was mindful of was the little corner square being pressed open and the seams between each. Oh, here's the block here actually. There's 3 blocks here. No, there's 2. So that's all that you have to really be mindful of. There is 3 blocks here. These 2 are pressed open. Okay, here's a block. Let's do it this way. Here's a block right here. And then this is a block with the neutral to the left. Here's a little block. And then here's a block. So between the blocks, the seams are pressed open. And one of the other things that I also found when making this quilt was that if I was sewing along on a row and I was interrupted by something and I had to get up and leave the sewing machine, it's very easy to get the orientation wrong. And after I take all of my blocks off of the design wall, I number the rows. I pick them up horizontally, one on top of the other, and then I number them 1 through 10. And I put a little piece of paper at the top of that block. And when I'm ready to sew, when I begin sewing, I take off the next block that will go on this row. So this block will go on this row like this, because we have top, left, top, left. What I would do is I put a pin in the very top of the row as I'm sewing each block on, just like this, and that tells me that's the top of the row. Because you may get, I mean, I have my grandchildren here, and just different things can happen, and I mean, a block could get turned easily, and you might not know how to orient it, and just so that it's quick, and again, you don't have to think, I just pop a pin. So if I'm sewing this block next, I'll just take my pin and put it like that, and I know this is the top, and that goes on the row that way with that at the top. And then if I'm sewing that block on, I just again pop my pin in there so that I know that this is the top of the block, and that's how that block gets added to the row. So just something that I found helpful, especially if you're sewing at night and you're a little bit tired, which I tend to do, sewing at night too, and you may be tired. So it does help you to orient the blocks as you're sewing along. And let's see. So let me see. I'll just quickly tell you, if you want to make this quilt, the blocks are approximately 5 inches, squared down to 4.75 inches. There are 10 blocks across and 10 blocks down. And I use 2 jelly bars, and you cut the jelly bars into pieces that are 3 different sizes. So the sizes are 1.75 for the colors and 2.75 for the colors. And what I did was I cut 25 of the 2.75 and 25 of the 1.75 of red, 25 of those 2 sizes for blue, 25 of the 2 sizes for green, and I have brown here, but it should be brown. I have blue. 25 of the brown, 2.75 and 1.75, and they're all by 5 inches because, again, Your jolly bar is 5 inches by 10 inches, and we're cutting this way. So they'll all be by 5, and then it's 1.5, 1 3/4, 2 3/4. So you need 25 of all the colors. You need 100 neutrals, and that is those strips, which are easy to cut if you have a strip cutting ruler. You need 100 of those, and with the jolly bar, 2 jolly bars, you have enough. And then I cut 100 of the little red and ivory squares for the quilt. And those you can, again, make any color, whatever you'd like. And this again shows the orientation, if it helps to see this little pinwheel that forms with every 4 blocks. Here's your pinwheel here. And here's a pinwheel down here. So it's really a fairly easy layout, easy construction. It's a quick quilt to make. Lots of fun. And again, I had these 2 jolly bars in these colors, and I said I'm going to use these up. And I think the borders that I will put on this quilt will be like this. I think it'll be this ivory and red, and then the blue and the red. And it just has such a vintage feel. Excuse me, I'll bring this back. Let's see, is it upside down? I think so. Turn it this way. So I think that the colors that I will use for the border are this ivory. Let me see, am I in the frame? This ivory, probably the blue, and then the red. And it will just kind of give a nice vintage feel to the quilt. And I named this quilt Rosewood Crossing, just because of all of the roses that are in the quilt. And because these neutrals are kind of a crossing, the way they come together. So, and it is an uneven rail block, I would guess. That's how I would describe it. So, that is it. I will leave this image here. Again, if you would like to take a screenshot of that, it's just easy peasy. And just another side note, if you don't have a jolly bar in your stash, or if you have a layer cake, you can use 1 layer cake, cut it in half, and then do your cutting from there. But if you don't have a jolly bar, you can certainly use your scraps. You can make the entire quilt scrappy, or you can cut from your yardage 10 by 5-inch pieces and then proceed to do your cutting. So I just thought I would share this very easy quilt, and very fun. I have really enjoyed it. I have loved not having to think about much of anything with it, other than pressing those seams open for the little corner square, and then in between the blocks. It's really mindless. This is just fun. There's nothing to match sewing these colors next to each other, other than picking out what colors you'd like next to each other. Beyond that, it's nice mindless sewing. So I hope you'll give it a try, and I will come back when the quilt is entirely finished. So thank you for joining me today, and I'm wishing you many blessings. Bye for now. I'm back with my finished quilt. Here it is. I've called this quilt Rosewood Crossing, and this is using the Blackbird fabrics. The line is Threads That Bind, and this was a jolly bar. I used 2 jolly bars, and you can see my border here. And I used 3 borders, 2 small and 1 larger. The ivory with red, the blue, and then the red on the outer. And this little block can be, it's so versatile. I mean, you could use Christmas fabrics, you could use a more modern look, you could use Civil War This has kind of a vintage feel. Could really use anything, and or just scraps from your stash. But it's just a fun and easy quilt, mindless sewing. The block is super simple, so I thought I would show the finished quilt. It's not quilted yet, it's just a top, but I will be quilting it soon. So thank you for joining me. I'm wishing you many blessings, and see you in the next video. Bye for now.